illnesses, limiting beliefs, addictions, fears, etc. All of these cycles and patterns are usually programmed by our families or by wherever we were raised as a child and stuck with us from a very young age. And so as we grow, we tend to subconsciously do things that reconfirm these cycles and these patterns. And so, one thing that's really, really important is for us to sit down and begin to recognize some of these cycles. One thing I notice so often of people who are just beginning their spiritual journey or trying to raise their vibrations and begin their spiritual journey is that a lot of people aren't aware of their generational cycles and patterns. And they don't understand how much of an important role this plays in our own spiritual development. Because if we don't understand the patterns and the cycles that have been playing themselves over and over again throughout our lives, then it's really hard for us to break them. And we find ourselves subconsciously repeating these patterns. And what I mean by this is that a lot of our generational cycles come from our parents, their parents, and so on and so on. So these are some ancestral blockages that we most of the time aren't even aware of. And we need to first think about breaking those cycles before we can begin on our own path. You are carrying a lot of the baggage from your mother and your mother's mother, etc. And then on top of that, once you are brought into this world, you're constantly bombarded with negative beliefs or patterns of your family members. I think everyone goes through this, and so it's just a matter of identifying what those cycles are and then choosing to first tackle those, and then you'll begin to see how your perception of reality begins to open up. Some cycles that can be found are cycles in our relationships. Maybe there are some patterns in your relationships that you're beginning to recognize resemble that of your parents or your grandparents or your relationship with your parents. Maybe it's something where you as an adult are repeating a lot of the same patterns that you felt as a child. So for example, abandonment or insecurities that you may have felt because of your relationships growing up. Other patterns can be financial situations. So if you constantly grew up around poverty, or if you constantly grew up around your parents saying, oh, we're broke or we don't have this or that, then this is something that begins to replay in your psyche, and you then carry out into your adulthood actions that portray this mindset of poverty. Illnesses, limiting beliefs, addictions, fears, etc. All of these cycles and patterns are usually programmed by our families or by wherever we were raised as a child and stuck with us from a very young age. And so as we grow, we tend to subconsciously do things that reconfirm these cycles and these patterns. And so one thing that's really, really important is for us to sit down and begin to recognize some of these cycles. So I talked about what kind of happens once you become aware, but once you begin to actually break the cycle, you begin to see that your reality isn't as it was before. And this can be a very good thing. Not only are you happier, you're more optimistic, but you have a different outlook on life and you feel as though you can achieve things without these blockages holding you back. A lot of the time, we set ourselves out to do something and we wonder why we can't do it successfully. And again, it's that subconscious belief that we aren't able to because of X, Y, and Z. And typically it goes back to some sort of belief that you were given as a child based on the reality of others around you. Not only are you happier, you're healthier, and your life becomes more peaceful knowing that you no longer carry the baggage of any generational patterns that may be repeating themselves. And most importantly, you feel a sense of freedom that you are not subject to these chains that are holding you down. I'll give a personal story. For most of my adult life, I felt like there was something unconsciously holding me back from achieving my full potential. I would go so far into something and then turn around completely, in a way self-sabotaging and not really recognizing the opportunity in front of me for what it was. I think a lot of this has to do with, things around abandonment and not really fully trusting. So as I started journaling and started to meditate years ago, I began to realize this pattern in myself, and I wanted to figure out what it was truly about. I was so frustrated, so fed up that I was willing to try anything and everything. So the first thing I did was I went to some hypnotherapy. did some great sessions with a therapist there, and essentially realized that it was all in my beliefs. My programming told me that I couldn't be successful. My program was telling me that I have to be in poverty because that's all I knew growing up. My programming told me that success only brings bad things, and this is all things that I didn't truly believe, but it was programmed within me. So whenever I got so close to achieving anything or any come close to success, I would back out because of this fear that I had that wasn't even mine to have. And so, through a few sessions with this therapist, I was able to reframe my idea of what it meant to be successful and reframe my idea of confidence and showing up and doing what I know I'm able to do. Fast forward a couple of months after my first therapy session, I was really obsessed with this idea of reframing my mind and my thoughts that I went out and I found another professional who does regression therapy. And through this, is when I actually was able to find out where this mistrust in myself came from. And I realized this was something that I didn't come into this world with, but it was something that I acquired through my family and my parents who have a major mistrust, but that's only because of their generational patterns that they did not break. And so I realized that this mistrust that I was holding on to wasn't even mine to hold on to. And when I saw that and I saw where it came from through the regression therapy, I was able to quickly release it and now practice trusting not only myself, but others. And now that I've started to do that, life has become so much easier. I am no longer on edge. I feel at ease. I feel at peace. I feel that freedom that is so important to feel when navigating throughout your life. Through my own personal experience, I was able to identify my beliefs and habits that weren't mine to have. I was able to heal myself from certain traumas. I was also able to set new boundaries for myself in terms of now that I know what's been holding me back, I can go out into the world and take the necessary steps to avoid making the same mistakes over and over again. Because reprogramming your subconscious doesn't happen overnight. It does take practice, but over time, you'll realize that you are creating this new reality based on your true beliefs and not beliefs that you have subconsciously been programmed into believing. So now how can you begin to recognize these patterns in yourself? One thing that really helped me was I started journaling a really, really long time ago. And this was super important because it helped me realize the patterns that I was repeating in my relationships, in my own personal life, in, like I mentioned before, even the self-sabotaging. I was able to see this all clearly written out over a period of time, and I was able to identify patterns and cycles that I wasn't the proudest of. And so once I was able to do that, I began asking myself questions like, is this something that I want to change? Is this something that is worth changing so that I can improve the quality of my life? And 9 times out of 10, the answer was yes. And so that's where I began my journey of recognizing my cycles and my patterns. I knew that I had an issue with trust. I knew I had an issue with abandonment, which was playing a huge role in my relationships at the time, which is not the best thing to have in adult relationships. But yeah, just recognizing the patterns that were holding me back. I was ready to make a change, but the recognition started with me being honest with myself and me identifying and seeing these patterns in myself as if I was a third person looking in on my first person experience with the world. So you really want to pay attention to any recurring issues that you're having throughout your life. For example, financial issues. If you're constantly finding yourself with $0 in your bank account, there might be something there that you can reprogram or identify as a generational pattern or cycle and eradicate it as quickly as possible, and then you'll begin to see the possibilities beyond this cycle. Another example is relationships. Relationships tend to reveal the biggest patterns and cycles we have because it's usually you against another person, and instead of you holding it in, a lot of the times these patterns present themselves to you, and so your job is to recognize this and decide to make a change. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. This can happen in all types of relationships. Relationships tend to be the quickest way to reveal any sort of cycles or patterns that we need to break. So lastly, I just want to provide you with a few concrete steps to begin recognizing these patterns and to begin making these changes. I promise by the end of it, you'll look back and you'll be so proud of who you've become. The great thing about breaking these cycles is that other people will recognize either subconsciously or consciously that you've been making the changes and will begin to slowly integrate it into their own lives. And so this is kind of like a chain reaction. And the idea is that it starts with you. If you make these changes, those around you will begin to change as well, slowly but surely, because you are raising your vibrations, you're releasing any blockages and raising your vibrations. Therefore, you will vibrate higher. And those who come into contact with you will either choose to get on the wave or choose to completely remove themselves. And this happens a lot when we're on our spiritual journey. So no matter the outcome, just know that by you breaking these chains, you will begin to raise your vibrations. And this is what it's all about. The first thing I want you to start doing is journaling. If you haven't started journaling, please start today, because this is going to be so crucial in your journey to identifying what these patterns might be. Write down any thoughts or reoccurring feelings that happen to you only on a daily basis, and then maybe taking the time to gain clarity in your current situations. There's no need to find answers through journaling. It's just a matter of expressing and releasing whatever it is you may be thinking or feeling, and then also being able to go back and recognize the change within yourself and your thoughts and your habits over time. Next, after you've begun journaling, some things will begin to come up. So the idea here is you want to be honest with yourself. This will require facing some uncomfortable truths that you may have not recognized before, but this is great because awareness is key. So next we have changing your environment. Sometimes breaking a cycle means removing yourself from negative influences. And what do I mean by this? As human beings, we tend to adapt to whatever is in our environment. And so if there are people around you or situations around you that are constantly reinforcing these cycles and these patterns that you're trying to break free of, it's very hard to do so in this environment. It's possible, but it's very hard. And so the idea is that you are making steps and plans to slowly remove yourself from the environment, because a lot of the times what people don't realize is that their environment is the sole reason why they're continuing these patterns and not breaking them. Once you've been able to really truly break free from these patterns, at that point maybe going back to the environment won't be as difficult to do, because now you are vibrating at a higher frequency, you've developed new habits, you are aware of certain things that others may not be aware of. In the beginning stages, you definitely want to make changes within your environment. And this doesn't mean you have to move out completely, because I know that isn't possible for a lot of people, but your environment includes what you're consuming on social media. It includes what you're eating, what you're consuming, what you're putting in your body. Your environment includes any music that you listen to, because music is frequency. And so you want to pay attention to the types of frequencies that you're inputting into your body. And food is frequency. Everything is frequency. And so your environment doesn't necessarily just have to be where you are currently living and who you are currently living with. Your environment is anything that you consume, anything that comes from outside and then goes inside of your body. And so you can start making small changes. One example for me personally is I started listening to frequencies a lot more. I started listening to instrumental music. I started listening to high vibrational music. And as a result, it got me thinking in different ways. It helped heal me indirectly because I was more consciously aware. And as a result, I began to change other things around my environment. Next, we have seeking professional help. As I mentioned, I did not do it alone. And yes, you can. However, I feel as though seeking professional help and going to those that you resonate with. So it doesn't have to be traditional therapy. There are so many other modalities out there. Some examples of professional help that you can seek are regression therapists, hypnosis, plant medicine, and all of these things, as I mentioned, are optional. So I don't believe that it's necessary to have professional help in order to break cycles, but it does help within the process. And I will add a disclaimer here. Essentially, make sure that you are going to whatever is calling to you. You want to really check in with yourself and make sure that it feels good. You want to do your research and make sure that you know that the help that you're seeking is going to help you. So next we have fasting. And this is an amazing spiritual tool for anyone who's looking to accelerate their process into their spiritual journey. journey. There are many different types of fasts that you can do, but I recommend fasting in terms of food because once you're able to clear out your body, your mind becomes clearer, you get emotional clarity, allowing you to see what attachments you need to let go of. And these attachments are usually going back to generational cycles and patterns. For example, doing a fruit fast for 7 to 10 days or 21 days or 30 days if you're a little more advanced will allow you to achieve clarity, and it will allow you to abstain from certain habits that you have that might be bringing you comfort. And this includes food, this includes social media. So fasting has been a really, really good way for me to bring in that awareness that's necessary for me to begin breaking these cycles. And if you do the fast for several days at a time, it will begin to build new habits, and you'll see that your brain becomes wired differently and you have different desires than you did prior to it. I'll end this video by saying that you should embrace your journey of healing. And so if you found this video helpful, please be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to share this video with anyone who might be struggling with generational cycles and patterns. Thank you.